Hello, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson. And a very warm welcome to this episode where we're talking about how to stand out in the job market. Now, we're talking about this topic because I seem to be talking to lots of people at the moment at the time of this recording in June 2025. I hear people talking about redundancies and layoffs, situations where they either are directly impacted, in which case they may feel like they're not choosing to leave, but they're being asked to leave and move on to different opportunities. But even if they're not directly impacted, they're in situations where there's great change. They may have to move into and transition into a different role, which isn't one of their choosing. And maybe they are also looking at new ways to change their career direction and look at new opportunities. There's a lot of change out there, but whatever the context is for you, I know that there is a lot of conversation as well around how to stand out. And this is a bit of a challenge in these current times where there is so much screening that is going on via AI that it's even very difficult for talented, experienced people to even get through the CV/resume review. In fact, what may be happening is that even falling down at that first hurdle. So the question that I am being asked is, well, how do I stand out? Now, to answer that question, and why I wanted to talk about it on this particular podcast episode, is that actually it doesn't start with your CV or resume. It doesn't start with your LinkedIn profile or how to navigate your way through the application process. All of these things, of course, are very, very important. And in fact, I have spoken about aspects of all of these on previous podcast episodes. However, to stand out, that happens before all of those steps. And that's what I want to talk about here today. How to stand out, how to recognize what your differentiating factor is as a person, and to make sure that you bring that out when you move into updating, writing your CV or resume, when you are hopefully having those opportunities to meet people for interviews and go through the different stages of the application process. And before we jump into the thoughts around that, how to do that, the strategies, I just want to share with you that I have a great resource that accompanies this podcast, which is for people who want to improve and develop their leadership communication skills. This particular training resource I'm offering for free to accompany the podcast series. And I would love for you to download that, have access to it, and take your learning and development further. If you'd like to get a hold of that, feel free to head over to www.culturecuppa.com/leader. And I'll put that link in the show notes. But coming back to the topic itself about how to stand out in the job market, I want you to really initially think about this as self-leadership. And I've mentioned that at the beginning of this episode that often in the context of change, where you haven't chosen that change, it can feel like things are out of your control. You don't get to choose. You're the one applying for the new jobs. They get to decide whether you go forward or not. And of course, that is true factually to a certain extent. However, what I want you to step into in this thinking, in this episode today, is your own self-leadership. What are you in control of? And that is very much your own career narrative. How do you position yourself? How do you think about yourself? And what is the identity of the person you want to be when you show up, and how you write your CV or resume, how you go to those interviews? And that is self-leadership. So let's break it down into tangible strategies and things that you can do. The first area is seeing your talent. I think that too many people jump into updating their CV or resume without really thinking about this point first and taking the time to reflect and identify the common threads and ideas throughout your whole career, no matter how short or long it may be to date. So look back at feedback that you've received, whether formally in performance reviews, as part of personality profiling, or whether it's been more informally given to you. Gather all of this evidence and really ask yourself, what am I talented at? What are my strengths? What do people see in me? What am I known for? And in fact, even famous for in my career or organization today? And I use those words quite deliberately. What am I famous for? Because you will all be great at something very specific and unique to you. When you identify what that is, your special ingredients, and you're able to express that and talk about that, that is part of the magic that's going to help you stand out. So, this is not an easy process, and certainly it's not something that I recommend that you do once. In fact, I suggest you do it several times and in different locations. Find somewhere inspiring, somewhere different from your desk, because that isn't necessarily the best place to really think about this and get creative around what it is you know you're good at. Have a think about where you can be, an environment where you can free up your thinking and really explore these questions. For some of my clients recently, they have absolutely loved doing that with walking coaching, my Take Strides coaching, where we walk together side by side and we explore these questions in depth. So explore in the way that works for you. But what the question is that you're trying to focus on is, what is your talent? What is unique to you? From there, I would like you to then map your highlights and your downlights, shall we call it, your lows. The way to do this is to take a piece of paper and very simply map along the bottom time and map along the top your highlights to lowlights. So this means really understanding where it was in your career that you had some amazing wins, some amazing impacts that you're really proud of, but also some moments in your career which were challenging and tough. I want you to map these out and to label them so you can see them and you can see, when you join them up, almost like a graph and the movement between the highs and the lows, the highlights and the downlights. This exercise, I think, is very important because what it will show to you is that, yes, you've had some amazing highlights in your career, things that you definitely want to be highlighting in your CV or resume or talking about in interview. But also, you've had those low moments before, moments where things were not going according to the plan. But because you've mapped it, you should be able to see that you turned it around, that you got back up towards the highlights again. And that's quite an important reflection. We always have moments, lows in our career. They happen at points, transitions. But what we can't see, we can only see where we are in the moment. We can't see what happens next when we're in it. But when you reflect back in this way, you'll be able to see that you did recover, that there was an opportunity that came after that low. And in fact, you may be able to identify what was it that you learned from that? How did you grow from that opportunity moment? If you can really reflect on that, that is powerful, not only for your resilience in the current moment, particularly if you're experiencing that low again, but also to recognize positive things come out of lows. There is always something that you can take from it and understand how it's helped you grow. So that is the second area, mapping your highlights and your lows or downlights. The third area is what's important to you And what brings you joy? I was reminded about this question recently, and I was really pleased to have the conversation with somebody about this because it reminded me that part of standing out is knowing what you want, knowing and talking to the right people, the right organizations that align with who you are. And when you do that, when you find that match, they feel it and you feel it. So really ask yourself, what kind of work is going to align with who you are and what brings you joy? What values are important to you? What kind of organization do you want to work for next? Maybe there are parts of your career where you've worked for organizations that didn't feel fully in line and that didn't feel fully comfortable to you. What kind of work, what kind of things are you doing on a daily basis that really light you up and make you the most engaged, your most brightest and lightest? Again, these things are going to help you stand out. So identify them and use them as part of your criteria to apply for the jobs that you are. From there, I want you to consider what your take is on leadership. If you've already been leading teams, what kind of leader are you? What do you think is the right way to be leading people? And what have been your own leadership journeys and stories along the way that demonstrate the kind of leader you are? Even if you're not leading people today, I also want you to consider this question. We all lead ourselves in some capacity or other. So really consider that. How do you lead yourself? What is important to you about leadership from what you understand it? What would you like to be doing with your leadership? So that is the next area. What is your take on leadership? What kind of leader are you? The final part of this is about pulling all of these elements together, really thinking about all of these threads, all of these questions, and pulling it together into your unique positioning and your proposition for applying to jobs. It's only at this moment that you can identify what the common themes are and to really fully recognize and validate yourself so you can stand out in your CV and resume, on LinkedIn, in the interview, and so on. How do you do this? I think there is nothing more positive than the two simple words, I am. So I want you to write a series of statements affirming and validating your identity and who you are based on the answers to the questions I've been asking you in this episode. Who are you? Write these out. I am, and keep going as many as you can. And, if you've run out of steam, come back another time and keep going and see how many you can get down. If writing isn't your thing, then you can also voice record these. And that's something I sometimes do. I voice record them and listen back. And that can be another powerful exercise to embed this more fully into your consciousness and identity. But consider this exercise as a way to really help you to fully recognize and sit with this idea of your talent, your uniqueness, and how you have a differentiating factor to everybody else. This, for me, is how you're going to stand out. But it doesn't stop there. It's not enough to do this exercise once because we tend to forget. And we, particularly if this kind of work maybe makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable or is not easy for you to look at fully in the eye, then I would highly encourage you and invite you to make it visible, reflect on this more regularly. So if you've voice recorded those statements, listen back on a regular basis. At moments, I listen to mine daily. If you've got it written out, then put it on the wall. Make sure you can see it near to your workspace. So this is top of mind for you. This for me is self-leadership. This is how you stand out before you even start writing your CV and resume, LinkedIn profile, or go to an interview. This is how you will cut through. I hope you have found this valuable, and I'm really curious to get your thoughts on this episode, as it is a little bit different, perhaps, from what you maybe thought I was going to share here. Maybe you thought I was going to talk about CVs and resumes or interviews. So I would love to know, what is your talent? What makes you unique? What is it that brings you joy? And what is important to you in your next role, in your next organization? I'd really love to hear from you, particularly if you are this person listening to this today who is going through that change and transition and looking to apply for new jobs. Reach out to me over on LinkedIn, my personal profile, Victoria Reynoldson, and message me over there. Let me know your answers to those questions. And remember, if you'd like to take that learning and development even further, then I've got that free resource for you to access. Just head over to www.culturecuppa.com/leader, where you can download Global Leader Impact, my free training resource to help you focus on the 5 key leadership communication skills that I believe leaders need today. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. It's been brilliant to be here, and I very much look forward to seeing you next time on the show.